Good morning. Welcome to our session regarding AI and finance. Really, we'll be talking today around one of the major health payer clients' journey to the cloud. I'm going to predicate myself now. So I've got my colleague here from Cigna who will be talking with me. So we're going to be focusing today talking about the journey for payers, major payers, and how they look at kind of the movement into the cloud applications. We've got a few things we're going to touch on. Jim's going to do most of the talking, kind of going through his timeline, his journey, and really the things around the footprint, what the footprint means, where and how. Not only is it around ERP modules, but where and how we're building the foundation to enable future broader enterprise analytics, insights, reporting, putting the foundations in place for AI to really come in over the top of those and go through. So Jim's going to drill into those pieces. I'm going to talk up front for a couple of slides just to really set some context, really around the landscape. I'll talk around what's typical in the footprint that we implement, and then Jim will provide more color as we get into the real meat of the conversation and the discussion. So what I'm going to do up front is I'll talk a little bit around Oracle's cloud for payers, so kind of the tech stack of what's out there, the components, how they will integrate. And then we'll go a little bit into some considerations around that journey to cloud. And then we'll really pivot into the main thing, and I'll hand over to Jim and he can talk around the timeline, kind of how the roadmap has been constructed, things put together. So with that, let me introduce ourselves. So I'm Tim Jones. I'm a partner at KPMG. I lead implementations of Oracle Cloud, predominantly working inside of the healthcare payer space. But also I kind of wear multiple hats. So inside of the conversation today, you're going to hear about certain technologies or aspects of Oracle's footprint. I'm a leader inside of KPMG for the Accounting Hub capabilities. So I have a practice that's dedicated all around the Accounting Hub and where and how we bring use cases of the Accounting Hub to life. And just so happens that healthcare and healthcare pay is one of those prime use cases that we have. Jim, would you like to just introduce yourself?
My name's Jim Seeley. My safe harbor statement is I'm here on my own personal behalf, not on behalf of my employer, because they are a highly regulated entity. So anything I say is really coming from my perspective and not theirs. But I've been with the company for over 22 years working in accounting. The last 15 have really been on EBS and now cloud ERP projects. So really coming from the functional side. So it's kind of, when we go through the slides, it's from my perspective and that journey that we've gone through really for the last 15 years.
Okay. So I said we'd start up front. We'll spend a few minutes just to kind of ground ourselves and provide some context. So if we think through the platform, the architecture in a healthcare payer space, what we're really trying to showcase here is, Oracle provides a fully integrated end-to-end stack across its applications. If we think through, whether it's my claim, my revenue, my policy information, everything is flowing from left to right as we architect and look at the diagram. Integration layers is always a great conversation in this particular journey around the capability you build there to be able to take data out of whether it's a claim adjudication engine or a policy admin engine and really start translating that into data that an accounting hub can consume. And then obviously my accounting hub is applying my centralized rules, my standardized rules on those entries that feed into the GL. And then my data goes further on its journey. Do you get that? Shouldn't have anything open. There we go. The data goes further on its journey down into EPM, where whether it's consolidation, planning, or allocations, that'll be coming up in, as a touch point or an interest point in a moment, where you get into some of the depth of allocation and allocation rules. All of that is consuming data, potentially feeding data back down to the ledger or to the accounting hub. I think the thing, and certainly if you look through CloudWorld, there's a lot of theme around AI and AI reporting. I'd say the piece that I'm seeing as we look at this architecture and we look at the use cases or the capabilities that are there is, yes, I'm getting capabilities embedded inside of the ERP, but it really, inside of the diagram I have here on the far right-hand side with Fusion Data Intelligence, FDI, the growth in that space as a product and an offering, its ability to not only connect into the GL, but also down into the accounting hub and bring that centralized, standardized way of being able to access the data with analytics, whether it's transaction data, debits and credit data, that is becoming a powerful component and really can become the launch point for AI work, whether that's around anomaly detection or whether it's where and how you want to apply machine learning across the footprint that we have. So I wanted to bring this up and spend a bit of time talking about it, because obviously when we come to a couple of slides down where Jim's talking, you're going to start seeing a lot of this coming into life. And not all, little bit of a spoiler alert for kind of your journey, it's not all in one go. So it's how you tackle at a large enterprise-wide basis, how you tackle that and break it up into the components and which pieces move to cloud, which pieces do I integrate in an interim state as you go through that particular journey. So that's part of the color that we'll be bringing with the session today. So with that footprint, there's a set of considerations that are in play. And as I mentioned, kind of analytics, AI reporting, you'll see I've got it as number 7 far on the right-hand side. I think the interesting point to this, and certainly as we look around implementing accounting hubs, we like to start on the far side, the reporting side, and work back, because there's dependencies, it influences things. The accounting that I need to generate to support, whether it's the management reporting or the external reporting, is going to influence a number of things along the way, whether it's influencing on the allocation side of the house, whether it's influencing the data models, or whether it's implementing your chart of account design in terms of the structure, the segments, and then the hierarchies that you have in there. So really, for me, it was at the end of the journey, but it's really not the last thing in the journey. It's a thing that's really kind of pulling back and influencing other activities as you move up to cloud. Okay, so I've gone through a few kind of context setting slides. I think, Jim, it's time for us to drill in. So you get the lights.
Sure. So this is our high-level roadmap of the project. And just to kind of point out, this isn't just EBS to R12, lift and shift. We're a highly complex organization. We have multiple ERP systems. So there is no way that we can say we're going to drop EBS and move to R12 in fell swoop. So we've really put this out into a 5-year, it's really a transformational project to go through this. So first is really the foundation. It's only listed on here for a year. The foundation of our journey to the cloud started way before this. In some context, it even started back in 2017 and 2018 with just the idea of how do you do these integrations, how do you build out those plans. So in building that, like a lot of the foundational work was, the traditional building your business case, going through those, your project plans, timelines, and building this out. The one thing I would really call out in this is change management. You can't start it soon enough. And it's not, though, at the traditional things you'd think about in terms of like training and your communication plan. It's really engaging leadership on the design, because traditional accountants, they really resist change. So any new idea, any change that you bring to the forefront, the more that you can head that off with the leadership to say, this is our design, this is how we're moving forward, has been a big win for us in this particular project of really kind of engaging that and setting that foundation from the beginning. Our phase 1, we actually just went live with phase 1, starting with July 1st. So our July close and now in our August close, we're almost done. So not quite 2 closes that we have done within our phase 1. So phase 1 is really about standing up our infrastructure of, kind of what Tim was alluding to of how we're bringing that data in, how we're bringing it through the accounting hub. There's also things, a lot of stuff around chart of accounts, those kind of components. Reporting wasn't a big focus for us because we have still are on-prem planning applications and other reporting platforms. So that's more in the phase 2 timeline where we get more into the deep reporting. We still have some simple like journal details, trial balance reports, but not the analytical report because we're still using the on-prem stuff in phase 1. Phase 2 is then just continuing to expand, right? So being able to split that information out so that we're not set on those components. So really phase 2 is our big focus is really going to be on building it out, reporting, a lot more work going into reporting, and then also on allocations. Phase 3, again, bringing in another business unit, expanding, continue with more, then we get into the EPM space around planning and allocations and going through that. And then our last phase is our international phase, which international, to be honest, is our most complex because we operate in so many different countries to be able to consider all the local requirements and what it's there. But the main part of it is the infrastructure's there, so we can adapt as we bring in those other countries and what their local requirements are. This next slide is really just a high level, kind of a mess of our infrastructure, but it really goes to show kind of the bottom box in that black box is all of our existing on-prem applications. So how do we get those applications into the cloud? Some of those are ancillary applications you will never move, but then how do you start building those integrations and connection points then in ways that it makes sense to move and migrate that data and what it means for what you're setting up from an infrastructure standpoint to be able to make it work. So from our phase 1 focus, it was really on the overall architecture. We're heavily utilizing the Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse as a staging area for bringing that data in. Then the accounting hub, obviously we have the GL for the ERP. We have a virtual trader component for that we've brought in that I'll talk to a little bit. And then from a Hyperion perspective, we're using, moved DRM into EDMCS. We have HFM that we moved to FCCS and ARM to ARCs. So all those kind of Hyperion products are all part of this as part of our phase 1 piece that we picked up as well. So this is the kind of the big slide that I want to spend a lot of time to talk about. So the first thing to kind of go back a little bit is to our chart of accounts. So we have multiple ERPs, I don't remember off the top of my head, 6 to 7 different ERP systems that we're consolidating into the cloud. We had over, if we took those ERPs and mashed them together, we'd have over 30 chart of account segments. And one of our goals was to say we do not want to replicate all of the data for all the different types of regulatory reporting in the general ledger. So how do we thin down our general ledger, and how do we do that? So we spent a lot of time focusing on those key reporting segments, and then being able to separate and using ledgers to differentiate the type of reporting. So obviously we have US GAAP reporting, but we also have a lot of regulatory reporting. So we have state filings, we have federal filings, all of those different things. So how do you leverage a ledger, so the Oracle's primary and secondary ledger, to accomplish that rather than trying to cram everything into a ledger? So we were able to get our chart of accounts on the GAAP side down to 6 chart of account segments plus 2 future values. So we've really pushed the envelope from our perspective in terms of how do you thin down the ledger, but we don't lose any of that data with the structure that we've created. So really how that happened and how we were able to accomplish that is through the Autonomous Data Warehouse, that box in the middle. So all of that becomes basically our staging area. So all of our interfaces, all of that highly detailed transactional data sits in ADW. From ADW, then it goes and it gets summarized when it goes to the accounting hub. And we have connection points of how that data is aggregated so that it becomes a tie-off point. So like for balance sheet reconciliations as an example, you can drill from the GL all the way back and get to that accounting hub or the ADW level of detail that came through. Same thing, so when we go the other way, when we're going from ADW, then we're going into the accounting hub. So we're summarizing into the accounting hub, and then we go from the accounting hub to the GL, we're summarizing even more. So when I talk about from a GAAP perspective, there was the 8 segments. I think in the accounting hub we have like 14 or 15 segments. So again, we're using supporting reference balances and being able to bring that across. So it helps us leverage those, and then we're able to build reporting off of each of those data points. We also have, we have the connections with the EDM or with the EPM stuff. So we're using EDMCS to manage our values and hierarchies. That's across all of the layers of this infrastructure. It's not unique to just your typical GL. We have all of those, 30 plus segments. We manage all those values and hierarchies in EDM, but only some of them actually go to the GL. The rest are actually maintained in that PaaS layer with ADW. Same thing. So on the EPM side, we use FCCS for consolidation, and then as well as for ARCs, right? So that's been a big thing of being able, from a change process, as to how to simplify the balance sheet recs, because we've thinned down our charts so much. So you're taking massive amounts of data coming through your transactional information, but then summarizing them so you still have your kind of key controls and tie-off points, so you can tie and reconcile that data. The other part of this that's maybe a little bit unique to us is we used Virtual Trader. So we have a partnership with Virtual Trader for our intercompany process. And it was something that was unique in that we were also moving to the cloud, and they have a journal capability. And so part of the question is why do we give line accountants two different sources of journal entries? So it was part of our investigative process and kind of working with them that we were able to kind of create all of our manual journals will now go through Virtual Trader. So essentially we've created a manual journal subledger. So we have all these rules about workflow and approval and segregation of duties, security rules. So we really have a front-end process. And based on the accounting role that a user is in, we can dictate what type of journal template they have. They can have a very thin template. They could have a very thick template where they're hitting all 30 chart segments. And that data then is going from Virtual Trader into ADW, so that from a reporting standpoint, I have all my journal entries, both system and manual, going through ADW, so I can stand up all of my reporting off of that platform. I think that's all I had, Tim, and I don't know if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. I think the interesting point that you've got here, Jim, is if you think through the hub and you're talking supporting references, now you're looking at all of the attribution aspects. So it's not just debits and credits inside of the hub. Your rules are generating those, but you're providing additional attributes against them that'll allow us to have the capabilities for insight. So what I'm meaning by that is, if there's things I want to see from a claim perspective or a premium perspective, it's not just a debit and credit value. I now can provide things in there, which potentially mean I don't have to come all the way back upstream. I have a centralized point down inside of the accounting hub. I think it also gets into this pivot of where we're going around reporting and attribution. And now I've standardized, I've built a consistent data model all the way across the tech stack. I have the ability to drill down, drill through. So I can start at the GL, I can come down to the hub, I can come across to whether it's the transactional data, I can come across to transactional data stored in the likes of the autonomous data warehouse. So the capabilities and the models are there. Now it's around the enabling technologies that allow you to access it. And that's why I'm saying the tech stack is evolving around whether it's FDI or other reporting tools that allow you to get into there to generate those insights, whether it's from an AI perspective, whether it's from just pure analytics perspective, or whether it gets into a wider, broader kind of Gen AI discussion. It's all around where and how I've brought the data together. And I think that's part of the success that you're kind of experiencing now with Release 1, and obviously will be the foundation of where you go for Release 2, is kind of having the architecture in place and the centralization of it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part is we have the infrastructure there in phase 1. Now in phase 2, as I mentioned earlier, it's really around the reporting, right? What do we build off of reporting really out of those 3 boxes, ADW, Accounting Hub, and the GL, and obviously you have your consolidation, but it's that insights that you can start to derive from that and how to better manage that data. So as an example, our expenses, we have an extreme amount of expense detail that we used to carry in our ledger. Now we're able to keep that up in ADW and then summarize that as it comes across. So when you look at a financial statement presentation, you're recording your expenses, you have the totals there, but you don't have like the department level details and all those ancillary details that controllers may want to see with that data. but now it's in a separate box and we're not replicating that data. That's what we used to see as we saw this replication for each phase. Now we're saying we don't need to replicate it because now we can stage it, we can link that data together so you can drill up and drill down throughout the process. And so then from a reporting standpoint, that's really our next emphasis, that our infrastructure is there, now how do we go out and build out the reporting?
And I think another interesting aspect, and you kind of touched on it with Virtual Trader, so kind of decoupling the conversation, a big conversation that we spend a lot of time with our clients around is dealing with the manual journal entry question. I think with Virtual Trader, you've been able to deal with whether it's the cross-validation rule issue, whether it's with the workflow, the approval. I think also how you've been able to, let's call it templatize. So where and how you've been able to delineate which templates are used and kind of where and how you know where you're hitting in terms of environments and the likes. I think that's been a pretty powerful tool as part of the implementation for certainly Release 1.
Yeah, I mean, from an end user standpoint, that was probably our biggest feedback that they liked the most was the manual journal change, which you look at it from a technology side and go, well, really, that's like the most improvement, but that's something they do every day during the close is booking manual journal entries. So the more that we can improve and simplify that process, the easier it is, really for them. So again, going back, we were able to customize, that with, everything we'll say in the cloud, don't customize, use standardizations. It's really not a customization. It's all free flowing in terms of how you set up your ledger and your structure. There's actually a lot of built-in APIs, so we don't have to redo the calendar, we don't have to do the close, we don't have to do FX currencies. All of those things are built into the product. But then it's an Excel template. So users love it because they can build their pivot tables and pull reports and do their analytics and connect it to a journal entry and upload all within the Excel file.
And I think one of the things that I really like with one of the words you used right at the offset, simplify. Because down to the how many fields or where and how am I entering things on a manual journal entry template, the more you can simplify that, I think the more successful you're going to be. And that's kind of a lessons learned that we've had out of a number of Accounting Hub Cloud implementations. Okay, quick time check. We've got plenty of time. Okay.
Next one.
Yeah, let's jump forward. So what I wanted to do was obviously we've talked around the tech stack. We've talked around kind of the data flow. We've looked at kind of the timeline, the parsing of the journey out into the various different components. Selfishly, for me, from a KPMG perspective, as we come into implementations across the healthcare payer space, then there are a set of assets, accelerators, templates, kind of whatever you want to describe them is that we bring in. So as we look through kind of whether it's a traditional health insurance model or whether it's kind of the PBM model or whether it's on the provider side or even kind of into wider, broader different product sets, there are event models, data models, kind of accounting rules that we bring in as a way to baseline and say, why won't this work for you from an implementation perspective? I think there's always the challenge, and I think Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, from Release 1, it was always a challenge, and I know you certainly went there with the chart of accounts. Don't just replicate what you do today, tomorrow. Challenge yourself and transform. And really kind of what I'm talking to is these solutions, these pieces really allow us to challenge the thinking. I can't tell you the number of times I've been to a hub implementation and we bring the technical accountants in and the conversation is, well, just because I've accounted that way for the last 25 years doesn't mean that's how I want to account for it going forward. So it's take the chance or take the time as you're going through the implementation of standardizing and doing a centralized rules engine to really challenge yourself around your accounting policies. If I was to kind of look at this slide and kind of present it to you in 12 months' time, there will probably be different things on here. And kind of where I'm going with that is, the solution sets don't stand still. So yes, great from a core accounting perspective. And Jim alluded to a little bit with kind of Release 2, where it becomes a bit more reporting and analytic focused. There are additional solution sets that are coming in on top of this, whether it's around automation. So automation of testing, very much kind of automation of testing from an accounting hub is a little bit different than everything else I need to do, because it's very hard to generate the expected view and then kind of pair that up against the actual view. But there are solutions that we can certainly bring to clients around that aspect. Touching on kind of that whole reporting analytics piece, there's more things that are happening. So as the products are growing, as we have more AI capabilities that are in there, there's things that I'm referring to as hub intelligence. So where and how we're enabling the accounting hub to kind of go to the next level inside of the journey. So it's no longer just an engine that is in the footprint that is consuming data and generating debits and credits and flowing things on. There's kind of like the next view of like, well, so what do I do with this now? And if you think through whether it's the data diagram we just had, which was our integrated footprint, or all the way back at the beginning across the integrated tech stack, from an accounting hub perspective, it's such a rich, diverse data environment. It's just prime for having solutions applied on top of it, which is around whether it's analytics or AI or Gen AI components. So I think that is a space that we're watching. We have solutions that are kind of early stage coming out into the marketplace. But certainly if anyone wants to ask questions on those, I can certainly field those questions.
Yeah, and just one other thing to touch on from the accounting hub perspective is in our phase one of our kind of guidelines is we don't want to go back and change our legacy source systems in terms of what they actually feed to accounting. So we're keeping the existing feeds. So we really use pass-through accounting, right, in our phase one. But in phase two, we have many of our sources are actually already set up in event-based. So there's new features and add-ons that you will see from an event-based accounting that happens in the cloud versus what we saw in EBS R12. So that's another big delineation, is that to kind of get our infrastructure stood up, we went through some of our pass-through sources first, because those are easier to kind of set up your rules, get those going. The event-based is a lot more meticulous and strategic in terms of how you set up those rules, so you can optimize the rules from a maintenance perspective and how those go through. But then, as Tim was saying, then you start getting into the supporting references, how those supporting references become so important to be able to, drive your accounting for your debits and credits, but the availability now of those supporting references for reporting context. So your reporting capabilities become so much more than, here's my code combination and it's a debit or a credit. You have all these ancillary attributes that you're able to start building your reporting off of, whether it's for management reporting or especially on the compliance side, you get a lot of ancillary exhibits that you have to facilitate. You don't have to go back to another data source. It's all there, either in the accounting hub or in ADW where we have it stored.
Okay, so I think we have a few minutes left. So I think what we'd like to do is kind of turn it around. Let's have some questions, because I know we've kind of given a lot of things out there, thrown a lot of material out there. So let's open it up for some questions. I don't know if we have a microphone or something, or... There we go.
I'll grab
You don't need a microphone.
With the 30 some odd chart of account structure go to the 6th position.
Yeah.
Or do you have a need to ever go backwards and kind of reverse map it back to the legacy chart?
In some cases we do, but for the most part, we didn't actually get rid of any of those segments. They still exist. It's just where they exist. So instead of taking that and replicating across the environment, like we just said, for most of those, so an example is customer, right? Customer is not something that we would typically put in the GL, but one of our legacy systems had it. So now we put that in ADW, it's there, it's available for reporting, and essentially gets summarized before it goes to the accounting hub. So that's the unique thing now with Virtual Trader, is we're not limited to your chart of accounts. So we can make that template. We have customer on our template. They can record to that segment, and it goes basically from Virtual Trader to ADW and then get summarized. So we're able to book to any of those dimensions, and that's where we've made it kind of role-based. So based off of you sit in this business unit, you have this X template, here's the fields you need to fill out, right? If you sit in this department, here's your 15. So you still have your common, natural account, department, entity, those kind of common things. You have as many attributes as you want to be able to book against.
Gotcha. Thank you. But if you wanted to, you could run it through Oracle
depending upon what the business rules are, right, of how. So I think for us, it was the manual journals, right? So how do you book a manual journal to that to drive it if it's not in your chart? Some cases you could drive rules off of it. In our case, we said let's simplify it in terms of how we stage that data. Do you have a question?
Yeah, you said in phase one when you implement an accounting hub, you use it as a pass-through.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming your source system assigned the accounting. Do you have plans for subsequent phases where you'll apply your rule sets and accounting hub and actually apply accounting from there?
Yes, depending upon the source, right? So some of the sources are very antiquated and old, so to go back and invest in those sources to change sometimes isn't worth the cost. So then you say, for those sources, we'll keep as pass-through. So it really becomes a question source by source to say, where can you drive the accounting off of the event base? Because that's the ideal solution, is to get, because in some of those, they're sending chart of accounts that are 20 years old that you don't have any mapping for anymore. So now you're going from that old system all the way up into your cloud chart, and you're basically dual maintaining. And some of them, it's worth it just because of the cost. So our focus is really about source by source. Yeah. But like I would say, like when we have new ones, right, our event is, you need to use event-based accounting. You do not feed us the accounting. We do not want you to dictate what the accounting is. We're going to move you directly to event-based anytime we stand up a new source. Yes?
How many integrations do you have?
For phase one, I think roughly about 10. When we get to phase two, I think we're probably pushing 70 to 80.
And how many sub-ledgers do you have set up from an accounting perspective?
What do you mean by sub-ledgers?
The application inside the hub.
Inside of the hub? So basically, I'm trying to remember, for this phase one, I think that's where we had 7. When we get into phase 2, because we're using more event-based accounting, that it's not 60 or 70. I think it's maybe 3 or 4 that we'll end up with.
And just on your integration pattern, so you've got 10 coming into ADW,
Yeah.
and then I've got a single pattern from ADW to the hub. Yep.
Yeah.
We implemented the accounting hub, but we thought about 40 to 50 applications for that sub-ledger application.
Okay. Yeah, it's always, there's no right answer. Because we've done this with a number of clients. It's like, well, how many is it? Is it one? Is it a one-to-one, so I end up with 50 or 60 of them? Or is it somewhere in between? And I think the art, and I think this is where Jim was kind of going with, hey, when I go to event-based, I'm not going to naturally just grow it. It gets into the art around, well, what is the most appropriate thing to do? So what is the data model? What commonality have I got on the data model? What commonality have I got on the accounting that needs to do, that needs to be applied? So at that point, you can start grouping things together. I mean, one of our first payer implementations, they went through and did an implementation based off requirements. They wanted to have it pretty much on a one-to-one map. So you ended up in the 40-50 type world because they wanted an easier way to be able to reconcile. Now, as they've stepped back and thought about it, it becomes a little bit more, well, that was great for then, but what I want to do now is really go and build, say, a claim subledger and a premium subledger and a centralized claim and premium one set of rules, and then flow the various different sources in. So there's things that people decisions they'll make as part of the key design decisions for an implementation. But as I quite often talk about, from a hub perspective, it's more of an evolution journey as opposed to a one and done, which is kind of where Jim was talking around, hey, well, I might start with pass-through because it's an easy lift and shift because I have so much else to do in a first deployment, knowing that, okay, release 2, and there's always fear of release 2, does it ever happen? But release 2 is like, that's where I might evolve and go forward and move it off. But there's pretty often, challenges in terms of being able to deal with kind of the old legacy applications.
Yeah, I think the other part that we did is because of ADW, it allows us to stage those files coming in. So anything that was basically, it's all pass through. So anything that had a common chart becomes one source, where before it was like one file is one accounting hub event. Now I'm able to consolidate because I'm staging all of that in ADW first, because then it all is one common file as then it comes across into the accounting hub. Lots of hands went up.
In the architecture, as a follow-up question to her, so all data going into the accounting hub always goes to the ADW.
Goes to ADW
Yes,
first.
goes to ADW first.
It's really our staging layer, right? So we actually refer to it as enterprise staging. So it's all going into ADW and being staged, then going through accounting hub and the create accounting process.
And the thought process behind that was you can go drill down.
Correct. Yep. So I think when we get into like phase 2, we're really looking at the Oracle Analytics Cloud to hook directly to ADW to be able to do your reporting directly out of there for, again, kind of ties back to that chart of accounts. Now I can do any one of those data dimensions that I want to do directly with OAC, but know that those financials still tie back to my general ledger. So it's really simplifying that from a general ledger in terms of what do I have to do from a balance sheet rec? What do I do for my core financial statements? I can always drill back and get that detail when I want.
And really kind of the FAW, or the ADW is operating as like a preprocessor in advance of the hub. So that it's covering a number of things like preparing data, but also a persistent data store.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, and did you evaluate where you the EPCM module in the cloud for doing the allocation?
That is what we were looking at as part of phase 2. So phase 1, we don't do any allocations, but that is what one of the products that we're looking at for our phase 2 allocations.
Okay, and what about ARCs? You mentioned that you would use it, but it's in another place.
So ARCs was in phase 1, so ARCs is the balance sheet reconciliation tool, so we did stand that up for phase 1.
And are you happy about this module? Do you actually use it or?
So I don't directly support it, so I can't give you a real honest answer. I don't know of any where people have really complained. I think traditional balance sheet rec tools is always making sure that you have your mapping and your rules set to say that this is my account string, this is the rec that it goes to. I would say it was probably a bigger from a change management perspective because phase 1, most of them were using Blackline, so it's a completely different tool. Versus phase 2, we're moving really from ARM to that, so it's probably a little bit easier transition from that perspective. But then it's, again, because of the chart changes, it's centralizing and standardizing processes to simplify those recs. So you're not doing, in our case, we would have been doing thousands of balance sheet recs. Now we've dropped that down to, I don't know what the number is, but 500 to 700, right? So we've really thinned down that because of the chart.
How long does it take your data to come in from the ERPs and enterprise staging, data warehouse, and the cloud?
I might phone a friend and have Prasad help me because it's virtually seconds. It depends on how big the file is, but some of our, from a manual journal perspective, that I've looked at, it's literally our average time from when a journal is approved till it actually goes through all the way the process into the GL because we're using event-based, we're not using batch processing, it is less than 10 seconds on average. And that all depends on journal volume. If I'm booking a 10-line journal entry or a 10,000-line journal entry, volume will be there, but on average, it was less than 10 seconds. Yes?
What kind of events you are using in FA? Is it only the sales that get into the FA or purchases and are there any other events that are still in the FA? Like you said, you have implemented 10 and you're planning for next 50, right? So are all these 50 systems for sales or are there different activities?
Different activities, so they're all ancillary systems specific to our business, so they're not Oracle products. And so we would set, based on that source system feed, we set up event-based accounting rules based on each. Premium recognition, claims. I think we even have some investment. So all of our kind of ancillary systems that feed in, we build event-based rules.
And the dimensions are specific to the tool.
Correct.
And what I heard is the motor dimension probably it would be more expensive to probably get
Oracle license, right, is based on number of
yeah.
records.
Yeah, it's volume. It's volume that you process, not the width. Yep.
But the number of dimensions is probably going to impact performance. So it is something to keep an eye on. But pricing-wise, it's number of transactions. Mm-hmm. Yes, in the back.
So obviously the thanks for sharing is really important journey going through all the data, pre-processing, all the application architecture, getting all that to work. Have you had any time, space to get into the AI?
Me personally, no. But I think for me, what the importance was is getting it stood up and getting our infrastructure set, knowing that AI is constantly evolving and developing. And the place that I think we will go to AI first, well, two parts. And one is, I would say, it's more machine learning, right, in terms of ADW, in terms of processing and efficiencies. From a business context, where I look at it is really around the reporting side. So where can I start to drive into those analytics and be faster with those analytics from an AI perspective? So that's the stuff that I'm starting to look at now as we start phase 2. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so depending upon what it is, in phase 1, all of it is a source system file that has the accounting strings already attached. In some cases, and I don't know what the database was I think it's actually an Oracle database that it sits on today, but it's taking basically an extract of that data and feeding to ADW. Could you set up other connectors to AWS? I'm going to say yes, right? We haven't personally done it, but I think the technology and the infrastructure is there. It just we haven't had a use case to do that yet.
So now we're just about up on time, so probably about room for one more question, I think.
Yes.
On your chart of accounts, we're looking at revamping ours. Do you think it's more of starting yourself to set up a process to change it over time, or should you try and change it all at once?
Well, I'll share my perspective and let Tim share his perspective because he's worked with other clients. For me personally, it was something that I saw when we started implementing R12 back in 2013 of why do we have this structure for a chart of accounts? How do you change? It is one of the hardest things to get people to accept change on is how do I do my reporting if I don't have that as a dimension? So there's always kind of a give and take, but part of it is if you stand it up now, you'll never take it away because you won't get people to come back and change. So part of it is forcing that change up front. And that's what I was talking about from a change management perspective is getting leadership to buy in to say, we realize this is going to be a very difficult change for users to accept. We need you to buy in. So then as you work through the mechanical details of what segments you keep and don't keep, they're already bought into, we're moving to a thin ledger and this is why. I'll let Tim share.
I think there's two bits on it. So when we talk chart of account design, there's the width, so the number of segments that are in there, and I got my depth, kind of the hierarchies and the volume on it. So I think you want to get your width set up front, because that becomes really hard to change. But bear in mind, what you can leverage is the supporting reference components. So I can define my core chart and get satisfied and happy with that. I do have the capability to add supporting references over time, so I can add those extra attribution components on. Now, if you come back to hierarchies, so the depth, that is, I think, the area where if I've got my structure, it becomes natural to evolve kind of those hierarchies and the piece in there, because you're going to be doing it over time anyway. I just think it's all about how you minimize kind of that amount of change as we look at your journey going forward. Okay. I think that's our time. The time up sign has gone up, so I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.